Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Your Forest podcast. It's going to be a good one today. Today's podcast is brought to you by Greenling Forestry, providing resource inventory analysis for a long time. High quality stuff. If you want to know what you got for resources, check out Greenling. I just made that up. I don't know what that was. Also, second sponsor is Damaged Timber. Damaged Timber is an apparel company out of Edmonton. Local company. They are supporting conservation and land management and that kind of stuff through the sale of their products. They're trying to start up a scholarship for people going into natural resource based programs, and I think they're going to try and take 10% of everything sold and put that towards that. So that's their goal. They're a really cool company. They got lots of really high quality t-shirts and hats and toques. They got like the symbol is it's a caribou hoof with some trees silhouetted in it, and they're really nice, really nice hats. Like, they're my favorite hats now. They're awesome. If you guys want to check them out, you can go to damagedtimber.com, and if you guys buy anything, put in the code YourForest10 at the end at checkout, and that'll give you 10% off any and all additional sales that are going on there. And so I think, like, regular price for a t-shirt, it's like $27 or something like that. And I think, they have sales on all the time, so you can get off of that. And then hats, I think, are roughly the same, around $30, but you can get 10% off, or if they have additional sales, you get way more off. So check them out. They're awesome. Today's podcast, we have a really cool one, conservation focus on it, and it is Todd Zimmerling. He's the president and CEO of the Alberta Conservation Association. They are a nonprofit as well as government-supported organization, and they do a lot of the counts and studies as far as what we have for populations in the province, as well as they acquire private land to be turned into conservation land through purchases or through other stuff. They're a really interesting organization. Very unique, very, very unique opportunity they have in the country. Really, I don't think there's any other organizations like them. It was a really, really interesting podcast. Talked about conservation of birds and charismatic predators and all kinds of stuff. Lots of hunting. Really, really good podcast. You guys are really going to like it. So without further ado, here is Todd and I. Here we go. It's podcast time.
All right, let's go then.
So anyways, thanks a lot for coming on.
No problem. Thank you.
This will be good. I'm excited to have another perspective on besides forestry perspective. So this will be good. Maybe you want to start just kind of explaining what the ACA is, how it got started, what your guys' purpose is.
Sure. Yeah, the Alberta Conservation Association started back in 1997. So this is our 20th year anniversary this year. And I'd say we're a fairly unique organization, certainly in Alberta, if not across North America, in that we're actually a delegated administrative organization under the Wildlife Act, which sounds complicated. But the reality is, essentially under the Wildlife Act, the government has said that a levy will be placed on every fishing and hunting license that is sold, and that money comes to the Alberta Conservation Association.
Right.
And with those funds, we are meant to work with the government and to undertake activities on behalf of the government. But in addition to being a DAO, we are also a not-for-profit society. So we also collect funds through corporate donations, individual donations. We get federal grants and that sort of stuff to allow us to do even more than what we can get done with just the levy. So we're unique in that way. We're a hunter, angler, trapper-supported organization.
Mm-hmm.
That's where our money is coming from. But we do a wide range of projects, from land habitat purchases to fisheries projects to wildlife projects, all across the province.
Yeah, looking at your guys' website, it's pretty extensive. You guys got everything, like the whole situation, right? Invasive species and wetlands, and like it's all over the map. So you guys got a lot of experience in taking care of that kind of stuff. How long have you been with the ACA?
I've been with ACA for the past 10 years.
Nice.
I came out of environmental consulting myself. So my wife and I started a company quite a few years ago, and we sold that out, and I then ended up coming over to ACA, and I've really enjoyed the change. It's kind of got me back to what I really wanted to be into biology for in the first place, working with fish and wildlife and working with the stakeholders themselves. So it's been really good.
Sweet. That's awesome. No, it's an interesting concept, having a private organization being responsible for like a giant portion of the management, or maybe not the management, but the population counts and the conservation side of it for public lands, right? It's a unique situation you guys are in, for sure.
Yeah, certainly it is, and I think it's important to be clear that we don't do the management. Our job is to collect data and give it to the wildlife biologists who work for the government, and they make the management plans, they make the regulations on if you're looking at harvesting issues, that's the government that is doing that. We're collecting data for them, and they make those decisions.
Yeah. So how much is the levy? Like what's the percentage in there for to you guys?
It varies depending upon the license you buy.
Okay.
I've asked.
It's listed on there, eh?
You'd have to go on our website. It'll show you how much each license would be and what proportion. Most of them, it's somewhere between 30 to, in some cases, up to 70% of what you're paying actually comes to us as a levy. Yeah,
that's really good.
I've tried to look into the background because, like I say, it's all over the place. A whitetail will be one thing, and a mule deer license will be different levy. And apparently, at the time when they were figuring out the levies, and keep in mind this is over 20 years ago. Now, a group of guys sat down and tried to think about how much more would a person be willing to pay on a license.
Well, it's pretty cheap already. Like you think about buying a whitetail tag, like this year I think it was $38 or something like that. Yeah. It's like, considering you can harvest the whitetail for that amount, that's like compared to the States, I think they're paying like a couple $100 or something.
Yeah, definitely. And we did a review of it several years ago when we actually did a levy increase, and our license costs are right in about the middle for all of Canada. So we're not on the high end by any means. And I think most people would be willing to pay more for sure for the experience you get in Alberta. Absolutely.
Oh, big time. I don't even blink an eye paying whatever. Like I pay like maybe $200 a year for my wildlife certificate, hunting tags and stuff, and like I get to go out hunting and do whatever with a few different animals and stuff like that. So I think that's totally worth it. I don't think anybody would blink an eye at having the chance at getting an animal, paying $100 for it if they had to. Not that I'm saying you should do that, but I agree with it. The only time it hurts is when you've got a family like I do, it has a wife and two kids that also hunt, so I'm paying close to $1,000. Yeah, then it adds up pretty quick. Yeah, go get a job. What are you doing?
It's definitely worthwhile. It's a lot of fun. It gets the family out there, and we get a lot of really good meat out of it. So worthwhile.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I just got my second whitetail with the bow actually this last weekend.
Oh, nice.
I'm pretty happy with it. So. Yeah, it's an awesome journey. I've been hunting my whole life and fishing my whole life, and I love it. I just want to promote it for everybody to get into, right? So,
yeah, it's certainly something that we certainly have identified as a primary focus that we have for the next couple of years here is trying to ensure more and more people. We don't necessarily need everybody to get out there and hunt, and as a hunter, I'm sure you'd understand. You don't really want everybody standing. No. But everybody understanding why it is important, and at least being acceptable to the idea.
Yeah.
And so we actually launched a new web page this past year, Harvest Your Own website, which is geared directly towards new hunters and people who are interested in it. So it's got all the steps of how you get to having a license, and once you harvest an animal, what do you do? There's videos on there and all that sort of stuff. So,
yeah, that's awesome. That's a really good idea, because I actually have lots of friends who they have questions along those lines, right? And I'll tell them what's going on, but they want to get into hunting and they want to get into fishing and stuff like that. And I mean, fishing's not as complicated, but hunting, you got to do the exam and stuff. And I tell them, I was like, yeah, I'll take you out hunting, but like, go do the exam. I'm not going to hold your hand. Like, I don't have time to do that for you. Like, it's fine. You can go do it. Right. And then not a lot of them do it. I had one buddy this last year who did it. And so I think he might have found your website and might have made things clearer for him, right? So I think that's a really important point. I think people don't know where to start.
Yeah, right? No, that's exactly it. And it is, it is relatively simple. The Alberta Hunter Education Instructors Association has everything online for you now, so you can take the exam online and learn that. Really the only complicated part is having to. If you're going to have your own gun and carry your own gun, you need to get your federal license, your possession and acquisition license.
Yeah.
And even that, the AHIA group will put that course on for you. And it's one weekend and you're done.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not a big deal. Yeah. I think maybe we should get into the idea of, I think people get confused. They hear conservation and like hunting, fishing, and trapping, right? They're like, oh yeah, they're tied together. They don't get how that works, right? So I don't know, maybe you want to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question I get a lot from the general public is, how can you support hunting and say you're a conservation group at the same time? I mean, you're killing animals. And,
right.
And the truth is, if you're hunting, you're certainly harvesting animals, no doubt about it. But the truth is, it's really the people who are out there hunting, fishing, trapping that historically, if you take a look at conservation activities across North America, that's the group of people that have always pushed conservation. They're the ones that started the first national parks across North America. They're the ones that pushed for regulations around hunting and trapping and fishing. So those really are the people who have put their time and energy and money into conservation activities.
Big time. Like you look at Theodore Roosevelt, for example, in the States, like one of the most notorious presidents for being an avid hunter and fisherman and all that. And meanwhile, he's responsible for the largest plots of land in United States history for being conserved and taken from private into public land, right? So, yeah, I think people have a hard time making that connection that the people that are actually out there experiencing the outdoors are the ones that want to make sure it's around, right? It's weird. They think that like hunting means that you're just a bloodthirsty killer. You like the killing, and it's something my dad always said was that he's like, I don't hunt to kill. I kill to have hunted, right?
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. Yeah. But I can see it though. If you're not a hunter, that's something that it doesn't dawn on you until you've actually had the experience and realize the actual killing of the animal is a small part of it, and that's not the experience. It's everything else. It's getting up early in the morning. It's being out there at sunrise. It's yesterday I was out -18 sitting waiting for an animal to come by. It was cold, but it was just crisp. It was just the experience. And that's something, as a non-hunter, I could see why people don't get that. But that's part of what I think we have to work on as hunters, is to try to get those people to at least come out and experience once. They don't have to start hunting, but understand the experience. So there's more of a connection there for sure. Yeah. What doesn't help us, though, is every once in a while you get the bad apple hunters who do exactly what people are concerned about and then put it on the internet. Yeah. And that's what makes us all look bad.
And yeah, exactly. It's the 1%, right? They're just, thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Yeah. No, it's not a good situation. And that's part of the reason I wanted to have you on, right? Is to kind of, I was trying to find somebody that could bring on that could talk about how that relation exists, right? The conservation and the hunting and fishing and all that. Because I think people think that, I live, or not me, I'm just saying like a person that lives in the city that likes to go hiking or snowboarding or something once a year, twice a year. They think that like, well, I have strong values about the environment. I want to protect it. I want to make sure it's around, but they've never actually contributed financially in any way to conserving those lands, right? Where we can say that people who have paid into hunting and fishing licenses, they pay annually for that. Like they're the ones supporting it directly, right? And yeah, it's confusing, I think, for people to wrap their heads around. But
yeah, it definitely is, and I think there's anybody who's a hunter, a long-time ethical hunter, wants to make sure it's a sustainable activity. So that's the first thing people worry about is, will I be able to undertake this activity in the future? And as soon as numbers start to drop, those are the people who start to raise the flag that there's an issue here. I haven't seen as many does running around this year, so what's going on? Or if there's a harsh winter, that's the first thing you hear the hunters come and talk to the government about is, we had a bad winter. Chances are the numbers are down. So what are we going to do to make sure we don't over-harvest this coming year? Yeah. And I think that's certainly part of what gets missed for the non-hunting public.
For sure.
Those people who are in the cities and do things like, go snowboarding, like you say, aren't contributing financially, but they do have strong values about what they think is important. But I find oftentimes their values aren't based on as much knowledge as what the average person who's spending some time out there. Yeah. And it just makes sense. If you're actually going out there 3, 4, 5 weekends in the fall, you start to see some things and you
appreciate it.
Yeah. You base your opinion on actual knowledge you've achieved, as opposed to hearing a news report sometime and, as you're sitting in your apartment in Edmonton, say, oh, that sounds bad. Yeah. I don't want that. Yeah. So that's sort of the way society works, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you think about spending, like, say somebody spends, like this year, I think I hunted 20 days. I shot one animal because I was hunting with the bow the whole time, right? But say even with a rifle, when I was rifle hunting, you spend majority of your time not shooting stuff. Like you spend most of your time and money, you're out there watching woodpeckers and whatever things that you're not going to harvest, walk around and you're enjoying it, right? If you're sitting in a tree stand, you got owls coming in and whatever, right? So that's, I think, for people to keep going out there like that and not getting that gain until the very end, right? There's obviously something else there besides killing. It's obviously something more spiritual than that, more connectivity to nature or whatever, right? Like it's definitely yeah, a humbling experience to be out there with nature and actually see them function without human interaction, right? So besides driving down the highway and seeing a deer scatter, right? Like you're not really watching them in their natural habitat. You're just kind of like, oh, look, there's a deer, but like they're completely aware you're there. They're not acting normally, they're acting differently, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely.
yeah, we definitely have a unique opportunity for sure to see that kind of stuff. So
yeah. And the other thing we're trying to sort of promote and make people sort of think a little bit more about is once you've harvested that deer. I mean, there's a lot of people very concerned about where's their food coming from nowadays.
Yeah,
you know, food safety issues. You know, has this animal been raised ethically? That sort of thing. Well, in the case of you harvesting a deer or a moose, it's been raised just fine. It was raised naturally. So you know exactly that. And from the time you harvest it to the time you get home, you know what's happening with that meat because you're in control of it. So that's something that's actually starting to appeal to a lot more younger adults, I'd say.
I see that as well.
To look at that for sure, yeah.
No, big time. I think like realistically the only argument I can see against hunting is if you're like a vegan or a vegetarian, that's the only, besides that, like if you eat meat at all, like, and you're opposed to hunting, I feel like you're not taking into consideration the whole picture, right? You're missing up some giant pieces of the puzzle there. So,
yeah, certainly. If you're eating meat, this is definitely. There's nothing negative to be said about harvesting yourself, that's for sure.
No.
And, you know, if you're a vegan and a vegetarian, you can, I guess, try to take the moral high ground and say you're not killing any animals, but the number one cause of population declines across the world is habitat loss. And so where do you think those vegetables are being grown? Yeah. It's on what used to be wildlife habitat. Yeah. So we all have an impact on wildlife one way or the other. So.
Yeah. Oh, no, for sure. You can't. Yeah. You're never going to be, you're never going to be totally free of that. Yeah, that aspect of animals dying, right? Like Absolutely. It's just, that's part of the ecosystem. That's the world we live in. But
it's no matter whether or not you're taking direct responsibility for the animal dying or whether or not you're letting somebody else do it.
Yeah, true. Yeah, good point. Yeah. Maybe we'll start getting into, I was thinking like the population counts and that. You brought up like hunters talking about, like say we had a bad whitetail year, like the 2012. The winter we had there, from things that I read, said that we lost somewhere like 60% of the whitetail population in the province. Is that true or is that inflated?
I think it varied significantly depending on where you were in the province for sure. So I'm sure in some portions they probably easily lost 60%. Yeah, absolutely.
Is that normal? Like, does that happen?
It is normal, and not just in Alberta, but just across North America. And certainly in Alberta, weather really is what drives most of our ungulate populations, deer in particular. You know, if we get 4 or 5 easy winters, we'll see our populations of whitetail just skyrocket through the roof. And, you know, you get one bad winter and it hammers them and drops them right back down again. Yeah. So it certainly is just something that drives our populations here in Alberta. You know, the impact of bad weather is compounded by habitat quality, obviously. You know, if deer have lots of good overwinter habitat, so, you know, good canopy cover to intercept snow and where they can get thermal cover and that sort of thing, well, the bad winter is not going to be quite as bad for them. But if we get the bad winter and there's a lack of good habitat, then you're going to get that much more of an impact on it.
Is snow depth the biggest problem with that towards ungulate populations, or? It's
it'll be snow depth and as well just sort of the hardness of the snow. So if you get we're about to have this week is we went from really cold temperatures and we're going to warm up again, which is going to make that snow that we have in the ground very wet. And if we drop to minus 18 again, it's going to form an ice pack. So if those deer can't get through that ice down to food, that's going to be the problem. So we might not need any more snow this year, and it could end up being a really harsh winter just because it freezes solid and they can't get down to the ground to get the food that they need.
Yeah, it's not good based off of, like, I mean, last winter, we didn't have a whole lot of snow, but we had like January. There was like 2 or 3 weeks in January we were above zero. Yeah. And then it snowed and rained, and it's just like, I can't imagine the chaos that reaped on ungulate populations, right? Because, I mean, I guess it's not necessarily that they can't get at it. It's more that it takes more calories to get at it than it does. So they just slowly starve to death, right?
Yeah, basically. It takes more energy than what they're going to get out of it. And in this case, I'm talking about, you know, a lot of the deer that are depending upon, you know, grain drops that or grain kernels that are laying on the ground in fields and that sort of stuff. I'm talking more of the agriculture areas. Right. If you're talking sort of more the northern and the forested areas, then you just have the issue of, you know, how hard is it for them to just walk across the snow? You know, they're breaking through all the time, and that every little bit of extra energy takes them to get the food. That counts towards they're reducing their chances of making through the whole winter.
It's not like they have snowshoes on; they got toothpicks for feet, and they're just punching through it. Yeah.
And you know, in your areas where wolves are, if the deer are a little slower, the wolves are a little quicker. then the wolves got to eat too. So
doesn't take much. Yeah,
exactly.
Crazy. So yeah, population count. So how do you guys? I mean, obviously it differs from species to species. I just want to talk in general, but like, how do you do it? Like, what is the frequency? Like, do you do, say, like grizzly bears every year or whitetails every year, or does it split up? Kind of the funding is spread out year to year, or what?
So from the ungulate side of thing, deer, moose, elk, that sort of thing, we're not really involved in the counts anymore. We were up to 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
But essentially it's aerial survey. So you put crews in fixed wing aircraft and you fly designated routes and essentially count the number of animals that you can see.
That's how they do
That's how
do
they
you
do
that in the north?
And well, that's it's
it can't possibly be effective.
They have they run through statistical models that try to deal with how much are we seeing versus how much are we not seeing. And so is there variation? Absolutely. There's a huge variance in what that number ends up being, but it's essentially the best method they have for trying to figure it out.
Cheapest and best.
Well, I don't know it's really necessarily that cheap, but it's the only way they have of getting any idea of how many animals there are.
I'm just imagining flying over like the bush in the north, like up by Manning or Slave Lake or something like that, and trying to see through the canopy and find a deer down there, right? Like it's especially in a fixed wing. It's not like you're in a helicopter where you can kind of stop. Oh, was that okay? You're just going over, right?
So basically,
they must be low to the ground.
And they will use in some cases. They will use helicopters as well, depending upon where they are. But they have to wait to get the right snow conditions so you can pick up tracks, so you can get an idea. Okay, there should be an animal nearby. I see fresh tracks, so let's see if we can find them. Because they're also trying to figure out is this a male or female. Depending upon what species they're doing, they might be looking at antler size as well, a large, medium, small kind of thing.
Really? Okay.
But that's essentially what we've relied on for years here in Alberta to try and get some idea where the populations are. And as a result, it is expensive to do each of our management units. So most management units, if we're lucky if they get done, maybe once every 10 years. If there's a particular unit that is having issues, they'll go back to it, more often.
Okay.
The ones up north that you're talking about, if they get done once every decade, we're probably lucky just because of the resources that are available and what it takes to try and do a unit like that. And if it's an area like that where there aren't that many hunters, not that much pressure, there isn't as much concern as there might be maybe along the east slopes where a lot of people are going out there hunting, and we are more concerned about where the populations are, that sort of thing. So
that makes sense.
So ungulates are problematic.
Do you think that those are like, so if they're flying, sorry, just to cut you off for a split second. So do you think that maybe they're driving those the tag availabilities based off of harvest reports from hunters and stuff?
Yeah, so that certainly there is other data that the government biologists are using. Certainly the harvest reports are using, and also, to be honest, they're taking feedback from hunters and landowners. Okay.
So it's all they're actually getting real world, actual on the ground.
Yeah, and a lot of times what they're doing is saying, well, the hunters are telling me there's no animals out there. Maybe we should take a survey and see whether or not it lines up. And if in fact the survey comes back and says, yeah, we don't find any, okay, it's odds up. Or if the survey comes back and says, no, there's lots of animals, well, then there's a question of what's going on. Are they maybe moved, away from where the hunters are? So that's just a hunter finding them issue.
Exactly. There's always that.
Yeah. So it's not based just on the counts. They certainly use a lot of different information to try to come up with, but it's far from being an exact science.
Well, how would it ever be, right? You got to run algorithms and models to make it work, right? I was just kind of curious as to how the frequency and how that all kind of works out. So
for things like grizzly bears, we've been working with the government for the last couple of years in a couple different locations collecting hair samples. So essentially, what we've been doing is down south. A couple of government contract workers had identified a bunch of what they call rub trees. So these are trees that historically bears and it appears other animals have been coming to and just rubbing on them, just kind of like scent posts.
Yeah, scratching the back.
Yeah, basically that's exactly it. So we went out there and put barbed wire on these trees and collected hair samples and provided those to the government, sent off to a lab, and basically they're doing a population estimate using genetics.
Right.
So we've done that in the southwest corner of the province, and we just finished up in the northwest corner I think the government this year, we're not going to be directly involved, but they'll be doing it around, I believe it's Swan Hills this year. So they're trying to get a count basically all along the slopes of the province where the majority of the bears are hanging out.
Are they getting lots of black bear hair in there
yeah,
too?
Yeah,
the
we
Swan
certainly,
Hills especially, I would think. Yeah,
we certainly pick up a lot of black bear as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's probably enough data there to run black bear numbers, but at this point,
that's not what they're
black bear is
on.
not really an issue. We know we've got lots and lots of black bears running around the province, so it's not where they're going to spend the money right now.
Gotcha.
Other things like grouse species. Again, they're a very difficult species to get a good handle on.
Yeah, can't even see them when you're walking right past them, let alone.
Exactly, yeah. For some of the species that use dancing ground leks, like sharptails, we've been doing historical surveys of the number of leks across the province.
Leks.
And so lek is basically where the males would come to display in the spring. So some species will basically congregate in certain locations, and the males will spend their time dancing around and making noises to try and attract the females, and the females sit back in the grass and see who's doing the best job and saying, all right, that guy looks pretty cool. He's who I'm going to hook up with. But these are historical sites that they'll come back to year after year.
Gotcha.
So we'll count those and get an idea that numbers are up or down.
Okay.
So it'll give us a trend line, but it doesn't give us an absolute count.
Right.
That is one of the things we're going to be working on for the next couple of years here with the provincial government is trying to figure out a better way to get a count on grouse species like rough grouse or spruce grouse.
Right.
So the forest grouse that people. More people tend to hunt them when they're off doing something else. So I'm going moose hunting, but I'm going to bring my shotgun with me because if I happen to see a grouse, I'll harvest a grouse as well.
That's mostly how I do it.
Yeah, and I think most people probably do it exactly, just opportunistically.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really have good numbers on them, but some parts of the province, people have reported that those grouse numbers seem to be quite low.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to start looking at, how do we do this? Is it better that we start getting the hunters themselves involved, and maybe we contact you and say, hey, we notice you hunt in this area all the other time based on your survey. This year, would you be willing to be one of our survey guys?
Oh, okay.
Be a little more accurate in how many hours did you actually spend.
Be very
looking,
specific.
Yeah, as opposed to, well, I think I got 8 this season kind of thing, which
right.
is usually how it ends, because you fill it out at the end of the season and then you're trying to remember, what was it now?
Yeah, that's the way I'm always, what?
Yeah, exactly. So, maybe we go that way and select some people to ask them if they, maybe we supply them with a smartphone app of some type that every time you're out there, punch this in.
That's really smart. That utilize those resources. Why
not,
right?
Yeah.
You got foot soldiers, use them.
Yeah, exactly. We've been working with University of Alberta, Dr. Mark Boyce. He developed the Moose app. I don't know if you'd heard of that. So it's a similar kind of idea where the government has sent out notices to everybody who drew a moose tag saying there's this app. Mm-hmm. You can download this app and track the number of hours you spend out hunting and what you see all the time.
I should download that.
So what Dr. Boyce has now seen over the last 4 years of testing this is the numbers that he's seeing correlate very well with any of the aerial surveys that have been done.
That's
so
good.
We might be able to help there and get information for a larger number of wildlife management units without having the cost of having to fly all the time.
Yeah, that's huge. You can get that correlation and use it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We also do counts on other non-game species. We piping plovers is an endangered species that we work on a fair bit, and we do 5-year counts for piping plovers in national survey. So we
that's a bird.
It's a small little shorebird basically.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And it's
like a grebe or
no, it's I'm trying to think of what it would be most like. Basically, it stands, I don't know, maybe about 6 inches tall. So,
oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
It's a tiny little guy.
Gotcha.
And sort of like a killdeer.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of people will be familiar with killdeer.
Gotcha.
So similar to killdeer. They get confused with killdeer quite a bit. So, but they fly south along the Texas coast for the winter time and fly the whole way back up here. They're unique in that they will nest on gravel beaches, usually a fairly saline lake. So they're looking for lakes where the water has come down and left gravel exposed, but where vegetation isn't coming in very quickly. So
why would that be?
It's just how they've adapted to. I mean,
What's in there for food? If it's saline, there's lots of salt. There's
well, they feed in lots of insects along the shoreline.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But when you see their eggs blend in perfectly. They look like little pebbles.
Oh,
so
I
that's
see.
really
So
what
it's
they're doing. It's just they have a very shallow little nest, drop a couple eggs in there, and they blend in really well.
Gotcha.
But they've saline lakes are limited, so their habitat is limited. If water levels come up, then it's gone for a couple of years, and water levels go down, then it appears again. So it's a species that we keep track of for the government. We do counts of snakes, various hibernaculums.
I ran in. This blew my mind, and I see you see garter snakes and stuff around Edmonton and Saskatchewan and that. I was up in Canfor's FMA in Grand Prairie, south of Grand Prairie off the trunk road, and I found a baby garter snake just in the middle of the boreal, like under the thimbleberry. I'd never seen one just in the bush like that, right? It was just coming out of the tent, and I was like, "What?" Like, I guess they're there. I just never see them because they blend in so perfectly, right? And they just avoid you. But that was the first time I noticed them not in like the prairie type area, right? And in the true bush, like where there's nothing around for 60 or 70 clicks, but bush, right? So that was an interesting moment for me. It was, yeah.
Well, they extend right up in the Northwest Territories into Wood Buffalo National Park there.
That's wild.
So they're across the province, and the best place to find if you're talking about boreal is you check out some ponds where there's tadpoles, and as those tadpoles start to become little frogs come out of the water, you'll see all kinds of very large female snakes there feeding on them, trying to get big and fat before they give birth.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You always find those ponds in the middle of the summertime that have been kind of cut off from a water source, and there's just hundreds or thousands of tadpoles in them, right, that are half formed.
Yep.
And that if it gets too hot, they're all going to die.
Yeah.
But it's a weird situation that I guess they got to find a stagnant pool to plant to stuff their eggs in, right? So it's a crazy one. What are the other species of snakes we have in the province? I know we've got rattlesnakes, garter snakes,
bull snakes.
Bull snakes, right?
Yeah. So those would be the ones most likely that you'll see. Yeah.
What's the northern range of like rattlesnakes and bull snakes? Roughly.
Oh, you're asking the wrong guy. Not very far north in Alberta.
Would they be in Edmonton, maybe?
No, you wouldn't find them. You're talking down around Medicine Hat area. You're basically we're at the northern limit in Alberta. So
I saw my first rattlesnake in Medicine Hat this last summer. Actually, walking through the dog park in the Hat, and sure enough, you hear that noise, right? I'm like, oh geez, it's like just like an evolutionary thing, right? Like I never heard it, but I knew exactly what it was. Yeah, I was like, okay, grab the dog, let's go. It's a crazy one. I never seen them, so it was something else for me to run into that.
Well, it's something to think about from a guy who spends most of his time up here doing his hunting. When you're crawling across the prairies along the Milk River Ridge and stop for a second, think, where exactly would I find a rattlesnake down here?
Right where I am right now. Perfect.
Yeah, basically, I've crawled up a coulee in the morning looking for elk, and then walked back down in the afternoon, and rattlesnake was right where I'd crawled. And, it gives you the heebie-jeebies for sure. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, they're an interesting species that I'm glad we don't have them in Edmonton, but also they'd be cool to see. But
yeah, absolutely they are. Yeah.
I noticed on your guys' website you have a little bit about like wolverines and that. How do you go about the same thing, aerial for wolverines?
No, wolverines. So it's interesting. So wolverines and basically all the other fur bearers we have in this province, there are no counts. Right. Nobody really has any idea how many we have in the province.
They're just too sparse.
I mean, it's impossible to see them from the air, really. I mean, you might fly around and see one, but that's all you're going to do. So we've been involved with a project with a graduate student out of the University of Alberta and Dr. Mark Boyce as well. And he started it, probably now 6-7 years ago in the Rainbow Lake area. And basically what they did was they built log traps. So essentially a log box with a drop top on it.
Oh, okay.
And so,
It's not a lethal trap, just
no, just for live trapping them. So essentially, you stick a chunk of beaver inside the trap attached to a string, and when he pulls on the beaver, the string pulls the stick, and down comes a big log.
I imagine the inside of those traps are messed right up when
Yeah,
you get back.
yeah. I mean, these logs are 8 inches in diameter, and in some cases, the Wolverines have chewed almost the whole way through the log by the time we get there. But
I can believe that.
So they spent several years essentially putting radio transmitters on these Wolverines and following around to get an idea of their home range. So they've been able to, they are developing a density estimate for that area, and we've continued that work now over in Birch Mountain. So I guess it'd be west of Fort McMurray.
Yep.
And the Rainbow Lake area is supposed to be an area with a lot of industrial development, and they were looking at what's the industrial development done to Wolverine numbers. And now Birch Mountains is an area where there's basically no industrial development. So what do we see there compared to Rainbow Lake? But with these data, we're hoping that we'll be able to, I guess, provide a rough idea of the number of Wolverines we would expect in the boreal forest of Alberta, just based on the densities we're seeing and habitat use. So if you have X number of habitat, one Wolverine per X amount of habitat, do the multiplication, and there you go. We have this many Wolverines. Right. Again, not an exact science, but it gives you a rough idea anyways of lots or little.
I'll just say, I hate to put you on the spot, but what do you think, what's the estimates right now for Wolverine populations in the province?
To be honest, I don't even know.
I don't even know. Okay.
What I do know is in the Rainbow Lake area, they and I don't know what their number was now, but when I went to the presentation for the graduate student, the numbers were well above what they ever expected, just density-wise.
Really? Okay.
The expectation was that human disturbance up there would result in fewer Wolverines, because that's always been the hypothesis that human disturbance bothers Wolverines, and Wolverines will stay away from it. But what we seem to have found is a lot of the industrial development up there is just seasonal. So there's winter roads that are put in, but a truck goes down there every week or so just to check a well site. Right. It's not like you got lots of traffic on it. So there's actually fairly minimal disturbance, even though if you look at an air photo, there's roads everywhere.
Right.
And when these roads were put in, gravel was needed. So there's gravel pits or little, which are now ponds,
right?
Because it's fairly wet up there. So they dug out the gravel to make the road, which then result in these ponds. And these ponds have been, we've had beavers move into the ponds. So you created a food source for the Wolverines, and that's sort of the current running hypothesis. We've got good numbers of Wolverines there because you've got a great food source, and the level of human disturbance really isn't that much. They certainly found an avoidance on roads with a lot of traffic. The Wolverines stayed away from it. But these roads where a guy just drove down once every week or so, the Wolverines didn't seem to mind that as much. So it was quite an interesting result out of that.
So they're not typically like wolf populations are, where they'll utilize linear disturbances to kind of hunt. They tend to stay away from it.
Yeah, they didn't seem to show that they were running down the roads or anything like that. They crossed them, but the beavers showing up in such large numbers there was something no one was really expecting. No one really thought about.
Just start finding spots and perfect. Look at this, nice habitat. Exactly. That's amazing. That's cool. I remember when I was a kid, I was hunting south of Slave Lake. And I ran into a track that was I didn't know. I was like, what the hell is this track? I've never seen this before in my entire life, right? And I still think to this day that it was a Wolverine track. And this would be up kind of by Grizzly Ridge, so getting into the Swan Hills kind of area, right? So is there Wolverines in that area?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There is? Okay. So I'm not crazy.
No, it could very well be a Wolverine,
Oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, I've never seen one, but I've definitely seen the tracks. That's I imagine they're pretty skittish animals too, probably. Eh?
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about it.
Similar to wolves and stuff, they're just steering clear of people.
You're really lucky if you get to see one in the wild, for sure. No doubt about it. Yeah.
Have you seen one?
I've seen one from a helicopter, and I've seen one on the ground.
Nice.
Yeah, but both of those were in BC. So.
Oh right, yeah. Especially in Alberta, everything's so dense. It's not like we have these vast open areas of parkland where we can just see there's a bunch of elk over there. There's a wolverine. There's a grizzly bear. We don't have a lot of that in the province, right? It's mostly pretty thick timber. So, okay, crazy. So talking about all these predators like grizzly bears and wolves and stuff like that, I think there's some confusion with people around the state of those charismatic predators, right, in the province, like the grizzly bears and wolverines and stuff. Can you maybe speak to the state of those animals here? Like, are they doing well? Are they still considered like endangered and stuff? Or
yeah, I mean, I can speak a little bit about it. I unfortunately don't have the numbers in front of me here, but I mean, I do know that black bear population, basically at this point, from the information I've seen, indicates that essentially all of our large carnivores in this province are doing very well.
Okay.
You look at black bears, and there's black bears all over the province. There's been a lot of good research out of the University of Alberta recently on cougar populations, and the numbers of cougars are way more than anybody figured because no one ever sees them. They're
so sneaky.
Yeah, they're very secretive. They're usually only moving around at night. I live out in Strathcona County on the east side of Edmonton here, and there's cougars running around people's backyards and their acreages. I mean, they don't know they're there, but we now have pictures of them on trail cameras, right? Yeah. So cougar numbers are doing really well, and they're basically following deer populations. Wolf numbers, we seem to have wolves in just about every square meter of potential wolf habitat that's out there, so they're doing well. And at this point, grizzly bears are the only thing that people seem to question, but all indications that we seem to be finding now is grizzly bear numbers are doing well. They seem to be increasing.
Okay.
We're certainly not seeing a decline in them. And the new data that the government's collecting here with the hair samples we've done, the genetics analysis, should give us a pretty good population estimate and give an idea of what the numbers.
Gotcha.
I do know that grizzlies are moving out of what we now would consider the traditional range. Certainly, 100 years ago, they were a whole way across the province. But, as of today, we would think, well, it's usually along the mountains and, in the thick forest. But they're now starting to find them out in the grasslands south of Lethbridge.
Right.
So they're moving out of that area and expanding. Some people have argued that it's, because of being forced out because of industrial development. I don't know whether or not that's the case.
Right.
You're finding 2 years ago we had a sow that denned and actually had cubs in the grasslands.
Oh, really?
That's where they used to den. That's certainly part of
historical habitat.
Grizzly
right?
bears are adapted for prairies. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. Just big long claws for digging.
Exactly. But when we showed up, we pushed them out of that area. But they seem to be moving back in. And
move out of the way. It's ours.
So it's going to be interesting. The big issue would be come down. Well, how do you manage a species like that and manage the human conflict that's going to come with it?
Well, that's the thing. Like I don't know if you want to speak to this or not. It's kind of outside of your scope of jurisdiction. But for example, the grizzly bear hunt in BC, right? How they're going to start banning that. And I think for people who think that the grizzly bears are endangered species, it seems like a noble idea to stop that hunt. But from my understanding, it sounds like where they're banning those hunts in the north is they're littered with them, and there's people that live in those areas that have to deal with it day to day. And it's just, I'm just curious to see I don't know anything about it, just from what I've heard. So I'm not claiming to be an expert on it anyway, but I figure you might have more of insight into that situation. Yeah,
well, this should be a good conversation too, then, because neither one of us are experts in it, and I'm just going based on what I heard too.
Let's just pontificate here.
Yeah. I mean, certainly everything I've read has actually indicated that it's not that grizzly bear hunting is banned; it's trophy hunting of grizzly bears that's banned.
Oh,
so you can no longer take the hide, the head, or the claws.
So you can only take the meat.
So you can only take the meat.
Gotcha.
Now, which effectively, I think, probably eliminates the outfitting trade. I mean, there might still be people willing to pay just to have a photo with the grizzly bear, right. and if I were to shoot a bear, I'd have no need to take all that back with me. I could just have a photo of the experience and take the meat. I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
But I would expect that's probably what you're going to see is just numbers being killed will drop because you're not going to have people flying in from the States who can no longer bring the bear back. I don't know. I guess we'll wait to see. The interesting thing is that when the government announced it, the minister did say that this decision was not based on biology. There's no science behind it. The population can be sustained with the hunting pressure that's occurring. It's because of public pressure we're making the decision.
From people that don't live in the area.
Yeah, which is unfortunate given that, all management agencies across this country state that their decisions are based on science.
Yeah, and that's we can't start going down that road, like pretending that the public is educated in situations, right? Like you wouldn't yeah, that doesn't sound like a good situation,
Yeah.
right? I wouldn't go to like an artist and ask them how we should drill for oil, because they're not going to know. Like, it's
Right.
just they don't have an educated, useful opinion on it, right? So it's, yeah, that seems dangerous. Science is a good thing. We should definitely hold on to
Yeah,
science.
it's certainly an interesting thing, but as I think as a biologist, it's something that I'm used to. It's one of the few natural resources out there where everybody gets an opinion, and
Of course.
and it seems to be treated the same as whether or not you have a PhD in biology or whether or not, as you say, you're an artist. Your opinion counts the same when it comes to making decisions about
Yeah.
wildlife and wildlife management.
Yeah, they're a charismatic animal,
Yeah.
right? Like, people they just like them on the landscape, and I think people get confused. They think that, like, the hunters want to destroy these animals, you want to kill these animals, you want to blah 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 whatever, right? I think we're but it's just like, I personally, I don't really have, I don't really like bear meat all that much. I'm not like grizzly bear meat. I don't know what that tastes like, but I'm not personally a bear hunter, but like I have a lot of people that are, and it's important to go black bear hunting, especially in Alberta where we've got such an abundance of them, right? Like, they're everywhere, it seems like.
Yeah.
But I could see why it's important to manage that species, right? Like, they need to be managed at some stage, especially considering there's people on the landscape, right? I've had this conversation a couple of times on the podcast, how as soon as our urban sprawl or our just our communities have moved into the forest land, we need to start managing for those species, because if you just let Mother Nature take its course, it's going to wreak havoc on all kinds of things, right? You don't know what the repercussions are going to be, because we're a new, totally different, dominant predator basically on the landscape. That's, you know what I mean? We're totally changing everything, so we have the ability to manage it and make sure things stay the way they are. We should probably take that opportunity, right?
Yeah, there certainly, I think, is often a misconception that if we just left nature alone, it'd be fine. And the problem is we've already messed up nature. So
Yeah.
if we had left it alone from the very beginning, nature would be fine. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as you say, we've already gone in there and messed up the ecosystem. We've caused issues in it. So yeah, there is a need for us to have to manage these species somehow. And that's really what's I'm looking to see what's going to happen in BC, because now the wildlife managers have an important tool taken away from them. So I would guess you're probably going to see just as many grizzly bears shot, but now they're going to be shot by enforcement officers because they're in someone's home or in the garbage dump or whatever.
That's the thing, right? So now
so
you're paying to shoot those animals.
Yeah.
They're going to get shot either way. So now you're paying rather than getting paid to, right?
Yeah.
And I think we can all agree that if someone's paying to do something rather than the government paying to do it, it's probably better for taxpayers, right? So it's a weird, but that's another impossible one, right? Like, nope. It seems like one of those arguments you're never going to convince someone's mind and to change their mind, right? Like, it's just not going to happen. And they could say the same thing about us, right?
Absolutely.
Well, they're never going to change their mind talking about us. But I mean, I don't know. I feel like if you have science on your side, it's kind of hard to argue, right? Like, there's all kinds of, I'm sure there's conflicting evidence, but yeah, you never know. So it's just, I just wanted to speak to you about that quickly, because I thought you might have some insight. But yeah, it's an interesting topic.
Absolutely.
But yeah, like, the ACA is into everything. Like, you guys are into another one that I don't know anything about. Is the old Rocky Mountain jackfish there, the bull trout situation. Right. So what's the bull trout situation like in Alberta now? Because I know they've been an endangered species for a while. But how's that looking?
Well, I mean, there certainly are some systems where we're starting to see some recovery, but I mean, bull trout is a species that depends upon clean, cold water.
Yeah.
Without that, they just don't do well.
Mm.
The reality is, with the level of industrial development we have in this province, we end up causing a lot of damage to our streams, whether it's directly through siltation or indirectly through increasing water temperatures, because we don't have the same forest cover around even just the little ephemeral streams that run into these creeks. Once the forest cover is gone, those ephemeral streams will warm up, and that pours into the main creek, so the water is warmer, all those kinds of things. So,
well, hanging culverts and stuff like that
hanging
probably
culverts
a problem.
certainly cause issues. Yeah, absolutely. So, I would say there's certainly some positive stories where we've seen a recovery of the bull trout, but for the most part, it's there's still a concern.
It's okay.
Yeah, we're doing a fair bit of work for the government, trying to identify critical spawning areas and trying to monitor the spawning populations to see whether or not we're at least staying stable as opposed to declining.
Right, but they're still a species of concern
For sure. Yeah,
Okay.
no doubt about it. Along with Arctic grayling, I mean, that's another
Right.
species that's dependent upon the clean, clear water, and it's the same sort of issue we have with them. So it's just, but it comes down to, as a province, we've got to make that decision as to, what are we willing to give up some revenue on one side for these species, and a lot of the companies involved, I think, are quite willing to make changes. So I think it's just a matter of ensuring we can get the government guys in the same room with the companies and decide what can we do here.
Have a civil discussion about
basically.
I just had a few podcasts ago, we were talking about caribou and industry and recovery plan there and that kind of stuff, right? And it's those types of issues are always, when it comes to like industry and jobs and conservation, I feel like people pick sides and they refuse to see the moderate position that you can take, right? Like it's, I like people look at like oil and gas companies or forestry companies or whatever, and they might think, they don't give a shit about conservation, or like they're just trying to get their money and get out, right? And it's like, well, that's, if they're a smart business, they're absolutely not thinking that, because how are they supposed to be a sustainable business over time if they're just out there removing everything and ruining their sustainability of their business, right? So I think most businesses haven't, or most industries have an invested interest into making sure that the environment is sustainable and we keep things kind of the way they are as much as possible, right? And I'm not saying it's being done the best. I'm not saying it can't be done better. Of course it can be, but I think I'm more talking to the mindset of these people, right? People think that people that work for these companies are, maybe they have no consideration for conservation, right? But I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I hope it's not the case. But it's definitely an important issue. And I think it's not like people are out there evil, like saying, you know what I mean? Like we should kill all the grizzly bears, kill all the caribou, and kill, like that doesn't exist. Everyone kind of thinks they're on the right side of things. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Hopefully we can come together and realize that there is a middle ground for sure, right? So, but like you said, with the bull trout or Arctic grayling, that's a big problem, like with watersheds and the amount of disturbance that we do have. And I agree, like even just people quadding through streams and taking the muddy route and stuff like that, like that can be a big concern. I imagine even the last podcast I did was on wildfire, like the increased probability of catastrophic wildfires in the province or in the world, and that's relation to water quality and stuff. So I imagine these big catastrophic wildfires that are burning through watersheds and increasing the amount of pollutants as well as ash and just water in general that's going into the stream is probably a big problem as well. So it sounds like it's a pretty steep ladder to try and climb, right? But it's,
yeah, I mean, definitely is. And your comments about the companies, I think are important. I oftentimes people will characterize these major corporations as evil. You're absolutely right.
It's easy to say they
exactly
think this, right?
Exactly. Who's they? Right. And
people
and it
working
turns
for them.
out those are just individuals like you and me who have a job.
Yeah.
And they're not evil. They're just doing their job. So if you sit down with them, and our experience at ACA has been really good. We work with some of the largest oil and gas companies, certainly in Canada, if not in the world. We work closely with Shell, with Suncor, with Syncrude, with Devon, with Total, and all of those companies have been really good to work with. And certainly the individuals we're working with understand the importance of conservation and sustainable activities. And if you sit down with them and say, hey, these are the steps you guys could take to improve things, they actually look to see whether or not they can implement it, and they do. Suncor was the first organization in this province to start doing terrestrial conservation offsets.
Oh, okay.
So they actually provided funds to us to go out and purchase private lands to set aside as habitat, as a partial offset for impacts they may be having in their developments. Shell had just finished a 10-year agreement with us where they're providing us $200,000 a year to do the same type of thing.
Right.
So there's companies out there that certainly do, they know what's important, and they're quite willing to help out. The experience we've had has been, it's usually the big players that understand the importance and are willing to put money into it. It's the smaller guys that, maybe they don't have the extra cash to put into it. Maybe they're struggling. I don't know. Those are really the guys that are usually harder to deal with.
They'll take the risks, yeah.
Well, take the risks, and and there might very well be important reasons to them as to why, but the big
You got to feed your
companies,
family. You got to feed your family.
exactly.
And it's hard to argue with that,
Exactly.
right? But,
But certainly we've found the major corporations, the major oil guys in this province have been extremely supportive of conservation activities.
That's good. That's good to hear. Because I think it's easy to chastise businesses and say they and the big oil or the whatever it is, right? Like it's so easy to just point fingers and not see them as people that are. Yeah, I'm sure we can all come to a consensus if we just get together and realize that we can do integrated land management, and we can solve all these problems if we just, like, people are smart. Like we're a pretty great species when you think about our brain power. I feel like if we all get together from all these different spaces with biologists and foresters and conservationists and everyone gets together, and industry and researchers, and like I'm sure we can come up with something, right? Like we're pretty smart as a species. I think we can figure it out, but I think it's just so easy. It's fun for people to point fingers and go, right, I'm on the right, you're wrong, bad, you big oil or whatever, right? So it's just always something I thought was funny, that people that take that hard stance against something like that while thinking that they're obviously evil, clearly, right? Like it's just not realistic. But
exactly.
Crazy.
Yeah, and my experience has always been it's been a heck of a lot easier to have changes by working with rather than standing on the outside and pointing fingers.
That's why I got into forestry, and as I got into forestry, I realized that this is like wood fiber is one of the only truly sustainable resources we have on the planet as far as building material and stuff. And why not become a part of it so that I can create sustainable forests, sustainable habitat, sustainable environment, and help promote that while providing a giant resource to humanity, right? Like you can do the whole thing. It just requires a lot of brain power, a lot of thought, a lot of research, a lot of science to make sure you do it right. But yeah.
And the other thing I think a lot of people miss is a lot of the damage, the negative things that have happened has happened in the past. We're still dealing with that. I mean, the caribou issues we're dealing with right now is because of a lot of activity occurred in the past before anybody gave a thought to caribou and how should we manage them properly.
Yeah.
Things are being done very different nowadays. The same with, grayling or bull trout. River crossings are a heck of a lot different today than they were even 10 or 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like it's just, keep going the same thing, don't change it. The companies are changing. Government is coming up with new regulations as we learn, and as society changes what they feel is important. Yeah. And that's, I guess, in the end, it's society that allows this to happen. Yeah. Exactly. In the end, we are all to blame. We wanted the jobs, we wanted the industry, and that's what happened. So now we've decided, well, maybe we went a little too far. Let's back it up a little bit here, and let's see if we can fix the damage we've caused, and
let's put our head to the problem and figure it out.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, like your point saying that the problems people see, like they say, oh, this is all clear cut, or this is all pipelines or whatever, right? And it's like, that happened, like you said. It's a scar on the landscape, or whatever you want to call it. It's a disturbance in the landscape that was in the past before we were thinking about these things. Yeah. And although it takes a long time for that to come back, it's not to say that we're not currently working on becoming better and more sustainable and more conservation wise, right? Yeah, absolutely. So it's hard to point a finger at a profession and say, like, you guys are doing it wrong when the result of what they did in the past takes so long to come back into rotation. And, you know what I mean? So I agree with you totally, absolutely. One other thing, or actually a couple other things, but so you guys acquire a lot of land. The ACA acquires a lot of land from like agriculture areas and wherever, private land. How does that process work? And like, how do you determine what activities to permit on that land?
So on all the conservation lands that we manage, it's foot access only. Right. No overnight camping, no fires, that sort of thing. That's basically, those are the only restrictions on it. So our goal is to provide access to conservation sites without having to ask permission. And if hunting is available, then you can hunt. If berry picking is available, you can pick berries, whatever it might be. Right. We certainly have some lands where it's not allowed because just the location doesn't allow for it. Right. But as much as possible, we allow people to go out there and harvest, whatever they might want to harvest, apart from cutting down trees. We don't like firewood's a different story. But renewable. Well, I guess renewable. But it's renewable. Renewable in a short time. How about that? 1 year renewable. So we certainly encourage people to get out there and pick mushrooms, berries, harvest your fish or your deer or whatever it might be, but walking on only.
Right. So do you guys purchase those through grant money and stuff, or are they willed to you or something?
So
or?
it's a combination. The majority certainly are purchased.
Okay.
So we've sat down and identified particular focus areas throughout the province, and we've done that sitting down with partner groups like Alberta Fish and Game Association, Nature Conservancy of Canada, and Ducks Unlimited. So those are the three major land trusts in the province that we also work with.
Mm-hmm.
And we went through a big exercise several years ago where everybody sort of put their people in one room and looked at where we overlapped in our priorities and said, okay, well, here's some focus areas we can look at. So that's what we look at first in a particular focus area, and then within that, we'll take a look at we essentially will go through and look at every quarter section of land and rank it as to its conservation value to us and
Gotcha.
that sort of thing. So when funds come in, we'll go out and make those purchases. We'll also make purchases, like I said, conservation offsets when we get funding from a particular industry partner. They might have particular criteria they're looking for, maybe a location that they want to make sure that they do the offset in. So we'll go looking at that. But we also get money out of the federal government, where we've done purchase down in southern Alberta for species at risk. So in the southeast, we're buying land that was identified as being within the sage-grouse habitat area. And so we've been trying to restore native grasslands on those properties.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And we get donated land. We just,
Awesome.
actually just last month, we had an individual who has passed away, and we found out he left us 240 acres of land outside of Stettler.
That's awesome.
I'm
sure his kids are pissed, but
well, you always wonder. But it was great. I had never talked to this individual, so I don't know how we got our name, but it was great to see. And he just wanted the land conserved forever.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's good to know that. That's out there. Now you guys are there to manage that resource, right, and to keep it available to open to public, right? So it's still technically privately owned by you guys, but it's open to the public. So
absolutely.
That's awesome. That's really good. I got two other kind of pretty broad stroke questions just to finish things off here.
Okay.
One was kind of like what do you see as the major, like your guys' major challenges right now as far as conservation? Like when I think about it, I think it's easy to get sidetracked by charismatic megafauna like caribou and grizzlies and stuff like that. Whereas I wonder if like invasive species, as far as like grasses and plants and stuff, might be more of a concern, or what where your guys' focus is. I mean, I'm guessing it's mostly wildlife, but
well, it really I don't know if we
it's pretty broad stroke, like I said.
I don't know if we can pick one that's the worst. To be honest, our major focus is more on lines of education and trying to get people more involved.
Gotcha.
Because you're right, invasive species is a huge issue, but you've not just grasses and other things coming in, but what about Prussian carp that have now entered the province? And
really?
We've got them throughout the bow system now. So,
oh, Jesus. That's horrifying.
Yeah, so what are we going to do
good.
there? Exactly. So far, we haven't found any evidence they're having a direct negative impact on our native fisheries populations. But that's just so far. We haven't got enough information there.
Well, they've messed up quite a few river systems in the States, haven't they?
So there's
different species?
4 or 5 different species of carp.
Oh, okay.
And so it kind of, we don't know enough about it yet to know how bad it is.
So you catch one, you just keep it then,
well,
probably.
Most people, and we're now starting to see reports of people catching them and taking home and eating them and saying, hey, actually, they're not too bad. So who knows? Is this just another brown trout we've now introduced? Maybe in the end it's not as big an issue as we think. Now, brown trout have caused some issues for sure, but
But for now, if you catch one, they're invasive, so you can just take it. There's no regs around that.
They're not
whatsoever.
covered in regs at all. Yeah, so
same as like wild boar and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. We've got whirling disease that have come in, that has come into the province or has been identified in the province, which may have a negative impact on our fishery.
God,
so
can you speak to that? Just kind of what it is. I don't think people know.
So whirling disease was discovered in, I think it was down in Banff this past spring. So it's it impacts the muscle and nervous system of the fish and essentially causes the fish to swim in a circle. So it causes
whirling disease.
distortion of the backbone and the muscles along the backbone. So it actually causes it to whirl in a circle.
Wow.
And it's been in the States for quite a few years. And it's been now, well, first identified here very recently. And, the initial results that they found when they sort of ran around and tested fish throughout the province is they found in a lot of places across the province now.
Really?
So now the question is, has it maybe been here a long time and we just didn't notice? And we're at a more northern climate, so maybe it doesn't have as big an impact, or maybe we saw massive declines. Maybe there were massive declines in our fish populations and they've already bounced back and now they're fine. So there's all kinds of questions of how this is going to work. On the wildlife side, you've got chronic wasting disease in deer, which has the potential to go to other ungulates. So that's a huge issue as well.
Have they found it in moose and elk? And stuff
my understanding is they identified it in one moose from southern Alberta that had been hit on the road. And I don't know about elk.
You have to test the brain tissue, right?
Yeah, brain or spinal column, I believe.
So nervous tissue.
Yeah. Right now, there's a mandatory head submission requirement for deer that are shot sort of along the eastern side of the province, and the province is monitoring that way. But so all those are huge potential issues.
Yeah, of course.
But from my point of view, the bigger issue is people not caring. People not knowing, not caring, and it's like, well, it's deer. I mean, it doesn't really impact me.
Right.
I'm not going to worry about it. Or it's bull trout. I don't really care about them. And so if that happens, well, then species sort of wink out one after another without anybody really thinking about it until it's too late. So our goal is really just to keep people engaged, keep them thinking about what's going on in the landscape, and if nothing else, having a voice when issues come up. We certainly would like to see people supporting fishing and hunting and getting out there and being involved, so so hopefully there's a little bit more of an attachment. So when an issue like CWD comes up, I mean, you talk to a hunter about CWD, well, that is something that a hunter is concerned about. The average person sitting in Edmonton probably isn't.
Probably doesn't even know it's a thing.
Exactly. So if we could get more people involved and knowing about it, then
education.
Then they know,
Sounds like education is this answer to every problem, right?
Well, it is, but I mean, what we're trying to do is, because you're right, everybody said, oh, we just need to educate the public. Well, no, it's not more than educate. It's try to get involvement, not just educate, but give them opportunities to be engaged. So engagement rather than education.
Have them have some kind of stake.
We're running Kids Can Catch events to try and get kids into fishing for the first time. And we're finding more and more we're getting new Canadians coming out.
That's awesome.
We've got a big one that'll be running out at Wobman Lake. It's our only winter one, so it happens during the February Family Day weekend.
Oh, right. So you got free licenses or whatever. Yeah.
And last year we had 1,600 people out on the lake at Wobman on the ice. And
people might not know that. They might not know that there's actually, I think there's 2 days a year where you can fish for free. You don't have to pay.
Yeah, one week in the summer, one weekend in the winter where you can go and give it a try. So it's our way of trying to engage those people who aren't doing it yet and they want to try it for the first time. Well, come on out. We'll give you the equipment, show you how to do it. We even drilled holes for them. I spent 4 hours drilling holes last year. So
you got some forearm strength.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So those are the types of things we're trying to do is not just educate, but engage and get people to try it for the first time. And, now they've tried it, maybe they don't become an angler, but now they understand why people do it. And I've done it. I can understand why this is important. And I want to make sure it's there in the future. Yeah.
That's good. No, that makes sense. That makes total sense. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's kind of along the same lines as why I started this podcast, right? It's just to kind of get this information out there so people can, even if they don't partake, at least they can understand the issue, or at least have some kind of frame of reference for it, right? So for
absolutely.
Sure, absolutely. One final question.
Yep.
Very broad.
Okay.
How do you think? I'm always curious as to, like, in the world scale or Canada wide scale or North American scale, how do you think we do as a province or even as a nation for conservation values and stuff like that? And how do we rank? Like, do you think we're doing relatively well, or like we could always do doing better, I'm guessing, but I feel like we're probably up there as far as conservation values, right?
Well, my personal opinion is I think we do a heck of a lot better than what we give ourselves credit for, than what everybody tells us.
Yeah.
All we ever hear in the news is all the bad things that happen in Alberta,
That's what sells, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, when you look at the diversity of species and abundant species we have, we're doing pretty darn well compared to a lot of other jurisdictions in North America or around the world, for that matter. Can we improve? Sure we can. No doubt about it. But
there's always room for improvement.
Yeah. The nice thing about Alberta is we have the resources to actually do something. Right now, people are going to argue, well, money's not so good in Alberta. Well, maybe not right now, but relative to other places, we're still doing okay.
Yep.
So I think we've got a lot of we've got a well-managed resource. I think the provincial government does a good job at looking at the wide range of issues they have to look at. We've got a lot of very interested stakeholder groups. We've got good NGOs out there that are working on it, and I would think I do believe we have a relatively engaged general public compared to other jurisdictions. Now overall it's low,
right?
But we still need more. But I think we do a pretty good job when it comes to conservation issues in Alberta.
That's good.
So yeah,
that's what I want to hear.
Yeah,
that's good. But like you said, there's always room to do better. But
Absolutely,
it's good to know that we're doing some good out there. It's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah, it's certainly not as bad as what we're told we're doing.
Which is what you always get, right, from the media. Like you said, it's always
negative
like
all the time. We didn't meet this target or that target, and you hear stories on this past week there was a story about this black bear that has the three-legged black bear and how bad a conservation story that is. And yeah, okay, you feel for the individual animal, but you take a step back and look at how many black bears we have in this province. We're doing pretty darn good from a black bear conservation point of view. Geez,
when I was elk hunting in south of Grand Prairie this year, at one point I was standing on a hill slope looking at a giant cuplock. I saw it was five black bears. Yeah. There was a sow and 3 cubs, it turned out. It took me a while. I watched the sow pretty much most of the day, and every once in a while I'd see a cub, and then I'd see a different whatever, right? Yeah. And I was like, I found out there was 3 of them, and then there was another black bear in the same cup block, right? But I'm sitting there in one cup block, I'd see 5 black bears at one time, and they're like, Swan Hills is crazy. Like, I did a lot of cup block layout in Swan Hills, and you run into black bears every day. Yeah, they're just around. There's a lot of them. So
yeah, exactly. But, so. Yeah, I think we're doing pretty darn good for the vast majority of our species.
Awesome. Yeah. Good to hear. This is an awesome podcast. I think that we've over an hour just flying through topics, and I think we got through the general idea of what I wanted to get through too for the ACA and conservation, for people to get that idea. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
If anybody has any questions for Todd, you can just email me at yourforestpodcast@gmail.com, and I can send them your way, and we can get those answers out there.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. Talk to you next time.